All right, we're ready for reassembly, guys. We're back again. I'll show you a little bit about what we did. You can see we went in there and opened the exhaust up a good bit. Widened and raised. Transfers are worked. You can see that. Intake is widened. Nothing crazy. We didn't go crazy with it, guys. We just wanted a good work saw like I explained to you before. I did have to take the studs off on a 266. They just thread in, so you can take a pair of vice grips or channel lock pliers and turn these out. And the intake bolts in on a 266, which I really like. I do like that a lot. It helps keep the intake in place so it's not so aggravating. If you've ever done a 2 series before, you know how aggravating it can be to keep the intake in place sometimes, especially if it's not stuck on there. But I've decided to go ahead and use what we have. The piston's got a little wear on it, but it's not bad. It's definitely, the saw had plenty of compression. It ran good. This was a good running saw. It didn't really have no issues that I found. For the muffler modification, I'll go ahead and explain to you what we did there. Nothing crazy here either. That's the good thing about a 2 series, is you really don't have to do a lot. But behind this plate, there's a flap inside the muffler that's usually bent closed a little bit. And we just popped this off right here. 2/4 screws on this one because it's, you know, not factory like I stated before. But we just bent it in a little bit and opened it up, not all the way, because we still want some sort of, we still want just a touch of back pressure. We don't want very much restriction, but we want it to flow also. We don't want it completely blown out, because we're not building a race saw, we're building a work saw, so we want it to last. So that's basically what we did, guys. So we're also going to do a base gasket delete. So this is basically what's called a woods port, for those that don't know. Woods port is considered porting when you don't deck the cylinder. Basically a woods port. So I'm just doing this here at home. We're not at Bellhopper, so we don't have all the tools and whatnot that we do at Bellhoppers. We don't have the lathe or nothing like that, so we're only able to do so much. And today we're going to use ultra gray gasket maker to reseal the cylinder. This is what I tend to use. This is what Bellhopper uses. I sometimes use Permatex anaerobic gasket maker also, but it's quite a bit more expensive, and it pretty much does the same thing. So I'm not using it. I don't use it as much as I used to. So just found that this is cheaper. So that's what we're doing. All right, we're trying to get all the stuff on the, trying to get our sealer put on the cylinder here. So that's what I'm doing here. I know you can't see me right now. Nothing interesting. It's just trying to get it all coated here, and I'll show you when I'm done here before I stick it on there. Show you what I'm doing. Alrighty. Yeah, I don't try to do a whole lot of filming on the actual port work, just because it's not very not very easy to film per se, because you can't really get in there and get the views that you want on the cylinder, showing it off and everything. So that's why I don't really do much filming on the actual porting on my saws. Plus, I'd just rather not. I like showing the assembly and build and talking about what goes into doing it. It's what I like to do. But we got a nice coating on there. As you can see, it's nice and coated. You want to be careful not to get your vacuum tunnel there clogged up with the stuff, because you want it to be able to pulse. It's got to be able to draw a pulse through the intake here up through the cylinder, so it can pump fuel. So you want to be careful not to get that covered up. But that's pretty much it. And I'm going to use my ring squeezer. Makes life a little bit easier. Be sure to put a little bit of lube in your cylinder before you put it back together, so you're not reassembling the saw dry. I usually just typically use a little 2-stroke oil, whatever you use, or motor oil works too, but today I don't have either or, so I'm just using a little bit of penetrating oil. It's not the most ideal thing, but it'll suffice for some lubrication, so it's not dry when I put it back together. So that's what I'm using for today. So here we go. Get everything set up here. Make sure your ring is on the pins too when you're putting it back together. Make sure that your pin there we go. This out of the way. Support piston. Make sure that my intake boot there is lined up with the thing there. And we are down. Get our two bolts started here. I always like to go diagonally. Just helps get everything situated so our sealer doesn't dry and it has time to seal properly, so we don't have no air leaks, because you definitely don't want that. Make sure you got a clean surface too. Make sure your cylinder on the bottom's clean, and make sure that your cases are clean on the bottom where your mating surface is. Normally I would take the time to wash the whole saw down, tear it all down, go through that, but it's kind of difficult for me to do that here at home. So I haven't here today, but normally I would. So just FYI. Just made sure that my surface is clean and whatnot. This saw is really not that dirty. Most of what's on this saw can be blown off, washed off. So I wasn't that worried about it. Okay, cylinder is on. Just gonna go back and double check, make sure that everything is snug down. Make sure that all of our bolts are snug, evenly tight. That's important. Make sure that you evenly torque these so you get a proper seal. All right. Spin it over a little bit, make sure that we don't have no snags. Always want to make sure that we don't have no ring snags. And kind of work the lube in there. It's especially important to do that with a new piston and cylinder. It just helps make sure that everything is going to be happy before you fire it and ruin your new cylinder. You definitely don't want that. Definitely don't want that. All right, put the carb back on now. Make sure there's nothing in the way of our pulse hole. Got everything together as an assembly here. Gaskets in place. Carb is sitting in place. 4mm Allen. Have to use our socket head because this one right here, these bottom ones here are a little bit of a tool to get to. Also want to make sure that these are evenly tightened. You don't want to over tighten these either because it's phenolic plastic and it can deform if you over tighten it and cause it to have an air leak also, so we definitely don't want that. These old Tillotson and carbs on these saws are great carburetors. Usually didn't have much trouble with one of these providing enough fuel even with port work. These carburetors tend to be pretty adequate unless you're getting into something crazy like a race saw or something. But then again, most people don't run stock carburetors on race saws anyway because there's some tips and tricks that go into doing alcohol. That's a whole nother ball game when it comes to that. And that's all I use is a socket head because it makes it easier to get this bottom screw into the intake with the case there. We're just gonna make sure that we got it snugged up here. I'll always stick something on it and just kind of just make sure that it's snug. All right, snug. Snug as a bug in a rug. That one's snugged up. Go ahead and reconnect our fuel line. Reconnect our choke. It's in there. Reconnect our throttle linkage here. Put it in the carburetor first. And then once you got that in there, slightly squeeze the throttle. Set this up on top of there and push down. It pops back into place just like so. Alrighty. Now, reassemble our muffler. Okay. Make sure that we got the flange here. Make sure you put your flange back on. It'll cooperate with us. Flange is back on. All right. And reinstall our muffler, just like so. Sits right on there. We're going to install our two 8mm/5/16 nuts. once we put the bracket back on, getting a little too far ahead of ourselves here. Don't forget to put your muffler bracket back on. That's very important. Otherwise it can vibrate and bust things and tear things up. That muffler, that bracket helps provide extra support so it doesn't wear on the muffler and the flange on the cylinder, because it can do that if you run it loose or don't have that bracket. That's why it's there. Very important. Okay, they're reinstalled. We're gonna go ahead and reinstall our screws here. The long screw goes back through there. The socket head screw goes here. This way that everything lines up. This is why I'm going ahead and doing this before I tighten on anything. Because if you tighten one down or the other, things tend to get off track here, and it makes it a little more difficult to get it on there. Sometimes it can impede being able to put the bracket on. Just snug everything up by hand. And this is a 4mm Allen head. Right here, we're gonna go ahead and snug that up. Evenly tighten these. It's tight. Always go back and forth just a little bit. Notice where my hand is on the ratchet, guys. If you got a long handle ratchet, or any ratchet for that matter, this is 3/8, so this is really way too big to be doing what I'm doing with. But it's all about feel, mechanical feel. If you're not sure, you put your hand here so you don't have as much mechanical leverage. That's why they make long handle ratchets, for leverage, obviously. And if by putting my hand here, it keeps me from being able to over tighten these screws and breaking the studs. This is what I have right now at the moment here at my house. So this is what I'm using. All right, we're good there. Muffler's back installed. Go ahead and put the spark plug back in. We're gonna check our gap, check our color, make sure that it's been burning properly. And it looks like it's nice and gold, so it was doing okay in stock form. So we'll probably definitely have to add some fuel to it when we get it fired up. Go ahead and snug that plug back up. Same thing here. I always put my hand right here because I don't want to over tighten my spark plug. That's how a lot of cylinders get stripped out on the spark plug holes, because people want to over tighten things. Go ahead and reinstall our air filter. Wrong thing, flathead. Reinstall the air filter. All right. And we're going to check and make sure that my adjustment screwdriver will fit through here to be able to touch the jets, and it will. Just check both. We want to make sure that I'm able to adjust the screws before we reassemble, because sometimes if you have a little adjustment screwdriver like I have, a little steel adjustment screwdriver that I carry in my pocket every day, sometimes it tends to be too wide to fit through these holes on these Huskies. And sometimes it'll hit the case there and it won't allow you to turn it, but on this saw right here, we're just fine. So usually in that situation, what I do is I just leave the top cover off and I adjust from here. So that's what I normally do in that situation. If you have a small and narrow screwdriver, you should be fine, but in this case, this one's just fine. But with running the saw without the top cover, you want to be real careful not to run it too long or run it too hard. I usually strictly do that just for adjustment purposes, because you can overheat the saw and cook the cylinder if you're not careful. Because this cover acts just like a radiator shroud on a car. It allows airflow to go through the cylinder fins like it's engineered to for proper cooling. So you definitely want to make sure you don't run it too long like that. Just snug these back up. Okay, and snug. Good. Just check, make sure that we have some gas in it. We have some fuel. Alright. We're ready for startup, guys. Get you situated here. Gonna set you back a little bit here and see. The saw has not been started in a while, so we'll see how many it takes to get to where we're going. Set the choke, set the throttle lock. There it is. Need to set the throttle lock back. It's allowed. Reinstall the bar now before we get too far here, so we'll bring you back after we got the bar on it and do some final tuning. But if you notice, I had my finger on the cylinder. That's how I check them, to see if they're warmed up good. I usually hold my finger on the cylinder until I can't no more, obviously. And, that lets me know when I'm heated up enough to go for a high speed test on the rev, so I can check the high speed adjustment. So we'll bring you back here in just a minute. All right, so the saw is good and warmed up right now. I've been letting it sit here and run and make sure I've got good heat in my cylinder. So I'm gonna go for my high speed adjustment. you heard, it came to life. It's running pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with that. It's running pretty good. Stock muffler, it's still kind of conservative. We could go for more, but we're gonna settle with that. Literally, to do the high-speed adjustment, guys, that's literally all you want to do, is make sure that the saw is up to operating temperature. Make sure that your low-speed adjustment is well enough where the saw will sit in idle, even if it doesn't want to necessarily accelerate right off the bat. This applies to ported and stock saws for adjusting. You want to make sure that you've got good heat in the cylinder up to operating temperature, and then give her a rip for a short burst. You don't want to hold it for too long, because you can overheat it, overwork it, because it's not under a load. You're checking the free speed adjustment, which is not under load. So the ultimate test at the end of the day is in the log, but I've got to do some sharpening on that chain before we can go log test it and find a piece of wood. So that's where we're at with it right now, guys. She's running good. I'm pleased with it so far. It's definitely, I can definitely feel improvements over stock, because it's got better throttle response and much better. It revs a lot faster now. It's not nearly as sluggish. Compression is up now, so it's getting a more efficient combustion burn, I guess you could say. So it's doing pretty well. I'm pretty pleased with it. The ultimate test is going to be in a piece of wood, obviously. So we'll get her sharpened up and probably make another video on a wood test on the 266. So if you enjoyed this, give it a like. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe. I'd appreciate it if you like what you see. Stay tuned. We're gonna definitely have many more builds as time goes on. So hope you enjoy. Over and out. Thanks for watching.